This is definitely the hardest physically demanding thing that I've ever done.
Put the weight on your right foot, yeah.
Being on an elliptical for 14 hours a day is pretty horrible.
It's quite the workout. They've made me feel quite nervous going into it. Like, well, you better be in shape.
It's so physically exhausting. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Cry babies.
The physicality that the actors that we had to do is real.
The key is just to show up as fit as you can possibly be. Like, do a lot of cardio, eat really well.
They all look good and they can fight. Every single one of them has awesome abs. I think that's a requirement.
In preparation for the stunt work, the production put us with a weight trainer, and then we did fight training.
It has been the most amount of physical exercise that I've done in my life.
We did some fighting styles. You know, the street fight combined with martial arts.
I have learned so many fight moves, the jabs and like the hooks, and I love the uppercuts.
Rinko and I do a pretty extensive stick fighting sequence.
Yeah. Yes, like a sword.
Rinko had not had a stick in her hand ever in her life, and we had to literally start them from scratch. Rinko did very well. I was really impressed with her.
We spent hours and hours learning this fight. Guillermo wanted something very kind of raw and visceral to juxtapose the giant robot, monster fights. He wanted something, with no wires and no stuntmen and to feel as real as possible.
That was fantastic.
When people see the fight, it's pretty impressive. I'm quite proud of what we did.
Shooting inside the Jaeger was difficult.
That's the big gimbal set. They're being like shaken and tipped and rain's coming down.
Signal that is going to like crippling, back.
You're pretty exhausted going through these movements and motions, and you're doing take after take.
This and tomorrow. Finish the day. Wow.
It was very demanding.
They just feel the surge of neural pain. And every time we put them in the cockpit, they would come out trembling and looking for the sunlight.
We're breaking in these things. And I know Rinko, she doesn't moan. She's a warrior.
She was super hardcore, never complained, never said one thing, always smiling, ready to stay there for hours. So go figure that one. Every movie has to have a portion of analog practical effects to really convey the sense of physical reality of the film. We built entire city blocks, the buildings, the cars, everything was rigged with the same hydraulic system. So the whole set, the whole street would bounce when the kaiju is walking.
The sets are huge and massive.
I walked onto set the first day and was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the project. The sets are beautiful.
Background, action!
This set that we're in is the budget of season 1, 2, and 3 of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Just the set. That's money.
Everything that you see on the screen where we are actually in, physically touching, is real.
From a design standpoint, it's all manufactured, it's all designed. It's not going to existing locations and just dressing them up. The Shatter Dome, that was sort of the biggest evolution on the show, and it took a lot of people, many different concepts to settle on the final direction.
We're surrounded by green, and it's still full of practical elements. Props, hand toys, little vehicles, little elements, and I think that's the balance that he's found.
The biggest stage in North America could only accommodate 1/8 of the Shatter Dome.
We can't really get far enough away from that set piece on this stage to be the beginning of the set piece.
We created a grid of lines on the floor, and we moved elements, architectural elements around, but they really were walking left to right on the same stage over and over and over again. When they finally walk the Shatter Dome, it looks like a single walk in a huge space, but it really is 8 or 9 walks through the same set.
We have built an entire stage of a street for Hong Kong that, essentially we film in one day. Action! You're doing it on an accelerated pace. I mean, let's face it, it takes decades to build streets like that and the character that goes into it, and we don't have that kind of time, so it is a grand experiment.
How do I turn this on? I happen to love the set of Hong Kong. I loved it because they felt very real. And they were very challenging to light and very challenging to orchestrate stuff in with hundreds and hundreds of extras.
The set of Hong Kong I think they had 400 extras that day. For a minute, you get an idea of like, oh, this is what working's like for someone like Tom Cruise or someone. You're in the middle of like some awesome set, trying to look awesome, just being awesome.
Of course, you've got this creature that's of immense size running through an area like that. It's going to be kicking cars out of the way like it's nothing. Essentially, all the buildings in the vicinity have been torn down to rubble.
What Guillermo really wanted to do was dwarf human scale, to give the audience a sense of how really small we are.
There's a lot of visual effects that extend our environments, and in some cases, they extend them quite dramatically. But there are large-scale pieces that work in conjunction with that.
Yeah. I go to take the first step, and it turns
I'll
into
be
a
there.
fault.
Okay. We got a window coming, guys. All right, let's go.
Some of the environments we had to recreate were just too enormous to get in a soundstage, so we were only able to create small portions or corners.
The Jaegers, we have elements of their feet and their highly complex shapes.
The Jaeger's head, for example, is we rebuilt that. It's called the Con Pod.
I think we can get a little more violence on the side to side.
Yes, based on what you saw on the little gimbal, the test, based on the harnessing techniques that these guys are using, that ultimately this will, in the long run, give us more.
When we looked at those control pods, we sort of sketched up quickly, well, this is going to be green screen, and this is going to be green, and this is going to be green. And week by week, it grew to a point where Guillermo was suddenly building the whole thing.
In Pacific Rim, we built the head of the robot. The resulting set between the rig and the construction was about 4 stories high. This entire set would shake and would be able to drop really rapidly for the drop of the head. The actors were in for a ride. It was like a little amusement park simulator. The easiest thing would have been to put green levers on their arms, on their back, and their feet, and have the actors have a complete free movement. But I felt that you needed something with resistance. So we had a piece of machinery that was a couple of tons in weight in their backs and in their legs and in their arms.
You've got a suit on, you've got a harness underneath, your feet are on these platforms that actually move the robot's legs.
If you put them in a small thing, somewhat it feels snug and it feels safe. But if the pieces of the walls are being torn, if the floor is being shaken, if the windshield, so to speak, is smashed, all these things give you an interaction that is more immediate and visceral, that they would be able to react to the impact. So every time they were fighting the kaiju and they would throw a punch, the whole set would throw that punch with them. And when they were being hit by the kaiju, the whole set would rock backwards with them and really, really shake them. By the end of the first 30 minutes, they were ready to collapse in hell.
So it was a real test of one's sanity and physical ability.
It's the most painful, exhausting, excruciating thing I've ever done in my life. But it does look cool.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
I really don't know what any of those guys were talking about. I think they're just really soft, to be honest, because I didn't think it was that bad.
I wanted to be a movie that was very, very intense during the battles, that you felt that they were real, that they were happening.
All of those small details, which, add up. They really do to making everything feel very real.
And it gives such a good quality to the action. The actuality of what, Guillermo has done, coupled with the CGI, is just amazing to look at.
We wanted to get real dynamics in the movie, not just CG. It renders results that are very different and much more satisfying than just going completely digital.
This shot, I think, we benefit from flipping the car.
This is a lot of work, but the results are very, very much physical on the screen.